Hello and welcome to the last part of the intermediate ARCHLine.XP webinar course series. My name is Zoltán Tóth, I'm the partner manager of ARCHLine.XP and I'm also a CAD and modeling enthusiast, so I can't wait to show you the little tips and tricks you could be using to create something like this, because today is all about upholstered furniture. Today we are going to learn how to create furniture legs, back panels, even if they have some kind of surface modeling, sort of like imitation, pegs and buttons and all kinds of rounded up surfaces. And we are going to learn how to put all these together to create elements like this one. Sofas, ottomans, chairs, headboards for beds and all kinds of things. Now, obviously, when it comes to these kind of elements, you could be downloading them from online websites, of course. But what if you're looking for something bespoke, something which is customized? Then you could be creating them. As always, I'm urging you to ask your questions on the left-hand side or below the chat bar, so that if you have anything you want to discuss in detail, you can ask me there. Last time, my colleague Iles told you all about visualization, so today we are not going to focus on creating renders. Instead, today is all about modeling. And just a quick reminder, this is a part of a webinar series. You don't have to watch the previous ones in order to enjoy this one. But if you want to go back to an earlier course to learn about, let's say, staircase design or how to import PDF and DWG floor plans, then we have a bunch of shows on that. And if you want to go back to the very basics, then you can go below and you can find the basic interior design course series, during which we are looking at cabinet design, creating floor plans, documentation, all kinds of things. If your interest lies mostly with architecture, then keep on scrolling, and here you can find a two-story terraced building, which is what we used for creating an architectural course, from the very first lines all the way to the immersive visuals. Now let's go back to the software and investigate what we are doing. Just going back to the website for one side note, if you want to follow along my course, then you can download the files that I'm using and the course guide. Now, about the course guide, this is a very important topic. This is all freely available. So if you want to take advantage of the content that we are creating for free, by the way, then you can download these things and you can follow along. Now, these course descriptions, they have all the details and everything you need to know. So that's what I'm going to follow during this show. So this, what you see on the screen, is the first thing that we are going to create. It's an ottoman, or a footrest if you prefer, and it's called Esmeralda. So that's what we are going to create today. So opening up ARCHLine again. This is one of the project files we are going to use later on. I'm not going to use this now. I'm going to open up a new project. And we are going to investigate how to create this footrest. Now, again, like I said, you could be downloading these elements for sure. But the point here is to learn how to create these things. And here's how it works. In our software, we have under the interior menu something which we call Smart Objects, which allows you to sort of put together complex, especially upholstered furniture pieces based on existing elements. Now, that having in mind, you need to know, so when you look at something like this, you need to know in your mind how we can break this down to smaller elements in a way that we can model it. So we see that it has 4 legs. So legs could be one entity that we are modeling. And then there's a base part for this footrest, and there's a top part. So 1, 2, 3 elements are the ones that we are going to create based on dimensions, of course. So how do we get started? Let's start with the legs. Now, for the legs, we are going to, let's just take a look at the image here. I think you can see here that the legs are very special because they have a cross-section, but they vary in sizes. So how do we make that? Well, for that, we have a tool which we call a Loft. And you can find that in the interior, sweep, and Loft. Now, what the Loft does is that it takes one path, and it takes a cross-section, and the cross-section is dragged along a path. If you want to have a horizontal path, you can do that. If you want to have a customized path, you can do that too. So that is what we are going to start with. First of all, let's define how high the leg actually is. It's going to be 140 millimeters. So right off the bat, the path is now modified. And the next thing I want to modify is the cross-section, because I know that the leg should be a rectangle and another rectangle, but they vary in sizes. So how do we do that? Well, we go to the second tab, where we can define which kind of section profile we want to work with. Rectangle is fine, but the sizes I have to change. It has to be 50 times 50. So here's how it works. The top of the leg should be 50 times 50 millimeters, and the bottom would be much smaller. I think it should be 10 times 10 or something like that. But the point is that here I have to say that this section profile goes all the way up there. So I'm going to click on plus, and now I have another profile, and I'm going to push this slider all the way to the end, and then I have with the check mark another profile here and another one here, which means that in our software you are able to make sure that the cross section goes from this to that size. So let's model that very quickly. So let's see what would be the ending point. I think the bottom would be 30 times 30. So let's click on the section profile and the bottom and change it to 30 times 30. And if I do that, you see what happens. The software distorts the shape from one cross section to the other. Pretty neat, huh? So that way you can actually find other, profiles, whatever you want. So that is not really, the software tries its best to sort of make the distorted profile. So let's just go back to the beginning, and that way, where was the rectangle? Just one second. Yeah, here we go. I'm just going to have to change this back to 30 times 30. And then we'll be good to go. Okay, so we have this shape, but the sort of the rectangle, let me just close my Skype because my colleagues are looking for me. So what we want to make sure that one of the sides of the leg should be vertical and the other part should be slanted. So how do we do that? We click on the section profile and we go to the profile settings, and here we can designate where we want the reference point to be. I want to move it here, so I'm just clicking on this part, and now what happens is that the section profile is pushed to the side, and I have to do the same thing at the bottom, and again click on this cogwheel, and yeah, just change it to 30 times 30 because I think this was a wrong profile, just like that, and it should be here. Okay, so now I have the desired shape. This looks like a furniture leg, but the material I'm not really fond of, so I can just go to the material tab and find something else. Maybe, let's see what kind of wood surfaces I have here. I think this is hardwood, so we are looking for something else. Oh, it's something darker tone. I think this is good enough. So let's just hit OK, and now I have a wooden leg. Am I done? Well, not really. I have to save this first. So I'm just going to go to the floppy disk. Already discussed how, the floppy disk is the saving button, and I think until the sun explodes, that's going to stay this way. So click on Save As and name this. So we know that it's called Esmeralda, which I'm not sure which manufacturer made this, but you could be designating it here if you know that. So it's going to be Esmeralda Ottoman leg. Category should be, I think, something furniture, or, well, my category, and it's going to be Ottoman. And again, if you have producer, you can designate that here. So let's just hit OK, and now the element is added to my library. So if I would hit OK, then I could, place this leg, and then I would end up with something like this. This is fine, but we are, nowhere near the desired shape. So let's go back to Interior, Smart Objects, and Smart Object Parts, and now comes the seat, or the bottom of the seat. So with the Smart Object part, the first thing I have to define is if I have a vertical or a horizontal piece. I know it's going to be a horizontal one, like that. And with the sizes, do I know the sizes? Well, at this point maybe I don't, so I'm just going to use it as it is. And now let's get familiar with the three tabs what we have here. Remember the 3D solid that I was modeling the kitchen cabinet with the maybe I'm just going to hit cancel and show you that again. So there's one part in the software where you can define a 3D shape based on 3 cross-sectional profiles, right? So you can say that this profile is like that, and the top profile is something like something this. So that way you can define using 3 section profiles or 3 projection profiles to model something very intricate from 3 different directions. That's what we are using. Again, let me just hit cancel. I'm not accepting this. So let's just hit go back to Smart Object Parts. Again, this is a horizontal, and now comes the very same 3 profiles with which I can define if I want to have a horizontal profile, a vertical profile, or something like this. The first tab, I think from here this should be horizontal, here as well, but the third one, it should be something else. So I know that there are several profiles I could be using. I'm using frontal profile number 1. And now we go back to the first tab, and I now know the sizes. So the base profile should be 600, and the base profile height I think should be 450. Yeah, this is looking better. And I think the height is 100, so that is good also. But you know, the problem is that this looks like a brick, and I want to round it off smoothly. I want it to look like this. So how do I make that happen? Well, there's a value, there's a tool that we call round off the edges, and I click on that and I see that the rounding value should be 10 millimeters, like that. So if I do that, the software would sort of fillet the edges. It's like a milling machine, right? But here's a quick warning for you. 2 things to consider here. One, you can define how high you want the surface resolution to be, so you can go all the way to the lower end or higher end. Why does it matter? That matters because remember last time I talked to you about project management and handling the project content. If you have too many surfaces, then your project might get loaded up with things that you don't need. If this particular element is going to be in the focal point of your design, then go for a higher resolution. But if you're looking for a placeholder, then probably consider going with a lower resolution. That's all the thing you need to know. Okay, let's find a nice texture for this with the 5th tab, materials. Let's go with linen. Let's go to the plus icon, and well, I don't know what I want to add. I only know the names, so I'm just it's going to be textile linen number 2. Oh, it looks very nice. I love this high resolution material. So now I have this part, and what comes next? You might have guessed, we can save it. Also, if you want to define how the line weights look like or the line colors, you can do that here. I'm not dealing with that. I'm just hitting the save button and save this as Esmeralda Ottoman base, I think is the name. The category would be again mine, and Ottoman would be the part. Okay, so I think this is good. There's another part needed, and that is the top part, which looks like this. So what do? Do we have to create this from scratch? Well, you could, or you could just place this down like this, double click on it, go back to the properties, and instead of creating the whole thing again, modify this one. So what we have to do first is that we have to change the height of this element. So this time it's going to be 160 millimeters thick. The rounding is okay, but the thing is that I need to have some kind of extrusion over here, so something which looks like, well, more inviting. So let's get familiar with the effects. The effects are stored in 2 tabs. One is adding effects to the top, and the other one adds effects to the bottom, or if you have a vertical piece, then the front and the back. So we start with this, the effects on the top. And here, first of all, what you need to do, you have to find which effect you want to use. This time it's going to be a pillow, and you have to add the intensity, the padding height, which is going to be 100 millimeters. Nothing is happening. Why? Because you have to hit the check mark, and when you do that, it appears. Now you can again define how large the area should be that you are adding a pillow effect to, but for now we are going to add the full surface. You could be adding sort of elements to the bottom as well. I'm going to do that a little bit later on, but before I do that, I click on the save button and I save this as, because if I hit save, then I overwrite my existing part, which I don't want. Save as, and it's going to be Esmeralda Ottoman top. The category is the same, so let's just hit OK. And now I ended up with the top, and there's the bottom, and we have a leg. The if I look for them in the object library, Esmeralda, then I have all the parts over here. Let's just put the bottom here as well, so that way you could see what's going on. Okay, so what do we do? Well, we already know how to move things around, so I could be using the markers and sort of like assemble things, Well, the only problem is that if I assemble this with much work, then things would not act as one object, right? So I want this to behave like one single object, so I don't have to like use the whole thing, highlight the whole thing and move them. Instead, I want this to behave as one single object. So this is when the smart object assemble comes into the picture. So let's do that. Let's see what this has to offer. This is actually a sort of like a workshop in which you can put together the things that you have created. Here you have a jump list of the things you have created. I'm not sure if my parts are here, so I'm just going to go with the plus icon and look for the parts. Esmeralda. I should have looked for a shorter name, to be honest. So I'm just going to hit OK. And now I have one part imported. Nothing fancy here. So what happens next? What happens next? I want to add the legs. How do we add them? We go to the plus icon, and fortunately I'm in the same library as before, so I'm just hitting the sorry, instead of just doing that, you have to put the check mark, otherwise you are going to replace your element. So now I have one element imported, and now I need to have another one, so I click plus, and now the software is asking me where do I want to put and what. So I can just highlight the faces onto which I want to glue another part. So I'm just going to highlight the bottom, and I hit the plus icon and look for the leg, like that. So now I have one leg, but you know, this is not the right position, so I just click to the side, and bang, the furniture leg is already snapped to that part. So let's just hit the check mark again, and hit the plus icon, highlight the face where you want the leg to go, and highlight the corner point, check mark, and again highlight the bottom, plus, and another leg. I think it's here. I'm going to amend the legs in a second. At first I prefer to sort of position them, and then I will amend how they look like. So I click here, and it's going to be a leg. There are two problems with the legs. One is that they have to be rotated. The other one is that because of the rounding, they are not in the right position. So this takes some guesswork, but I know that this one is good. The other ones have to be rotated. So what happens, I just have to click on the element, and I need to do the rotation. I think this has to be rotated with the blue axis, 90 degrees. This one's good, and then I click on the other one. I think this has to be turned 180 maybe. Yeah, that's good. And the last one, if I'm correct, has to be rotated 270. Trying to remember the increments of the 90-degree angles from the geometry classes. Are we done? Well, not quite. We have to define where the legs actually are. So we have to push them back 10 centimeters or 1 centimeter each direction. So let's start with this one. I go to the green one and say this has to go, well, inside, so that has to be minus 10 millimeters in that direction. And with the red value, I think it should be minus as well. That's good. Let's go for the next one. Again, we know the red value was minus 10, and the green value has to be 10 millimeters, so it has to be nicely chopped in. I'm going for the third one. This value, the green axis is minus 10. By the way, I'm looking at this data from the PDF. Obviously, it might take a little bit longer to figure this out on your own. The red value, I think, is 10. And you're going for the fourth one. The red value has to be 10. And the green value, a little bit confused here, maybe 10. Yeah, 10. So we're good to go. The object is ready for the top. So let's go for the plus icon. Click on the face where you want to have the last one, and click on plus, and go for the top, like this. So check mark, and my little footrest is almost ready. There's one thing actually missing. I want to give some, how should I say, substance to this element on the top. It has a nice pillow rounding on the top, but I want to have something on the bottom as well. I want to make this less artificial. So how do we do that? First of all, let's just hit OK and place the element we have. And now every time you double click on the element, you go back to the furniture maker. And if I click on any of the elements, you can go back to its original properties by clicking on the pencil icon. Now we are back where we started. This time The only difference is that if I would change the properties of this pillow, it's going to take effect here as well. So what we do is that we go to the tab where we can add pillow effect to the bottom. That's what we do now. So it should be, I don't know, 50 millimeters maybe. Okay, this looks much better. Let's just hit OK. Yes. And now the problem is that because of the pillow effect, the object is sort of extruding itself out. So what do I need to do? I need to sort of decrease the blue axis. Let's say minus 30 millimeters is on my guide. So that way it's pushed in, but it's a much believable effect. So let's just hit OK. And now I have the object the way I want it to. This you need to, so if I have the object like this, and if I double click, I can go back to the object maker and I can make it better. But it's always advised to save this as an additional object in your library. So what I usually do, I make a copy of this, move a copy like that, and then I go to interior, single object, new object, click on the whole thing, hit enter, and then you can name it as Esmeralda Ottoman, like that. Simple as that. If you are not satisfied with the texture, for example, let's find another one, maybe another linen, then I just replace one material on the with another one on this object, so that way you have another one. So that was easy, that was simple. But let's go for something more complicated, something a little bit more spectacular. There's a question, by the way, here about rounding of the edges. I'm going to answer that at the end because later on you will see how that's done. So let's load up the next version of this project where we have the, well, I don't want to lose this. I'm just going to hit save for now. So I'm just saving this. So let's go back to the original example that we had and investigate how do we create a chair like the one you would see on the screen. Now this is a chair we found on the internet from a manufacturer. It's called the Marseille chair. I think it is part of our factory installer. So if you install the software, this chair would be part of your library, but you would need to know how to create something like this. First, let's investigate what makes this chair special. First of all, it has a seat part which is rounded. That's very good. It has curved legs. And it has, most importantly, a curved back panel, a backrest, which interestingly has varying sizes, and it also has a sort of like a buttoned up this belly button shape effect. It's like it's stitched. So you need to know how to create this kind of effect that the padding under the material is sort of like pushing the texture outside. So how do we create that? Well, for this, we have to use some images that we might download from the manufacturer's website. So if you have images like this one, and you have no sizes or no dimensions, then these are your best bet to get started. So imagine that you have a picture like this. Then what you do is that you import this picture and you work from there. So that's what we are doing. So I'm going to show you how to do the same path as we did here. So we have the image in our library. We want to work with this image. So what we do is that we drag the image in and drop it into the floor plan. How large the image is, I have no idea, and I don't need to know. I just need to place it somehow. And then if I know the actual sizes, I can calibrate the image. Let me just move the image back here so it looks a bit tidier. So we go to the image, right click, and we say that we want to calibrate. Yes, we want to calibrate it like this. So click on the bottom of the chair and go all the way to the top. Like this, and say how high the actual chair is. I know from the manufacturer's PDF that it is actually 1170 millimeters. My software is currently in meters, which I'm going to change in a second, but if you have a millimeter value, you can input that too, but make sure you're not hitting enter now, because then the image is going to be more than a kilometer high. So instead just say millimeters, hit OK. Okay, now the picture is calibrated. Now I go to the settings, and I say that the units and angles should be millimeters, so as to keep it simple. I think this is good. Okay, close. And now we are in millimeters. That's perfect. This doesn't affect the dimension lines that my colleague has already put in here, because they are actually texts. So here we are. How do we get from here to here? Well, first of all, we have to record profiles and polylines based on which we can do the sketching. So let me just move this a little bit, like here. So I want to create this shape. How do we do that? Well, for that, we have a very neat set of drafting elements. The first thing I observe is that this is a symmetrical drawing. So let's not waste time drawing the whole shape. Let's just do it once and then mirror the profile. Here's how we do it. We go with the polyline tool and we start drawing. Before I do anything, I go to the snaps, the endpoint, so snapping options, and I choose a snapping which is called half division point. What it does is that I click on the point where I want to start my drawing from, and I click the other point, and now the software, instead of making the whole line, it just makes the line from the sort of like a half point of your drawing. And now let's create the shape. So I go from the midpoint to the edge where I bump into a curve, so I go with arc, click on where the curve ends and make the curve like this. And now let's keep on with the, I think this is a straight edge all the way somewhere here. And now I have an arc which looks like this. So this is actually there is some guesswork involved. I'm not going to lie about that, but you have to be, you know, the resolution is not good and it's not a image with high contrast, but I have to do my best to sort of track what's here. So let's click the other side, make the leg like that, and go as an arc over here. And I'm finishing on the midpoint. So I'm just going to move my mouse cursor to the top where I wait until the green happy lines appear, and then I go like this, hit enter, and now I have half the profile of a chair. How do I make it complete? I go to edit, duplicate, mirror, and I'm just going to mirror it. And now if I click on one of the polylines and I control click the other one, then I can just make a copy of this, and now I have this shape. Okay, so task number 1 is done. Task number 2 is to create like the top part of the backrest. So I'm just going to make another copy of this. You can do it like this, so you can just hit Ctrl C and Ctrl V like that, and then let's just say that there's a line here which sort of chops this profile into two. So what I do, I go with drafting and I try to make it like this. Try to copy the original seats high like that, and then you go with the delete between points tool and just delete what you don't need from your drawing like this, and you have a shape like that. So again, if you don't need the rest, you can just highlight and delete it. Next task is to create the seat itself. So how do we create that? Well, I don't have an image which shows the seat properly, so there is some guesswork involved definitely. So I'm going with a rectangle and I start drawing the rectangle. I need to have a rectangle of 500 times 500 millimeters. So I'm typing in, I hit the tab key and I add 500, and now I have another 500 option in here. So I'm finished like this. So now I could be clicking on the sides and say fillet this part, or if you don't like that, you can just say that I want to have a curve from here to there. So it really depends how you want to approach that. So again, some guesswork is definitely involved, but that's just the way it goes with modeling. So turn it into an arc, like sorry, let's just trim this back. Again, sometimes there are more ways to do the same thing, but for now I'm going to use this practice. This is not good. I'm going to amend that in a second. So I'm just going to say delete this and that and this. And now if I hit this part and I say edit, duplicate, mirror, and I'm just going to mirror it on in this point and delete whatever I do not need. Okay, and then I could be going on. I could be getting the curve of the back seat and the curve of the legs. So in order to get all the profiles ready. Yes, but how do we get from here to the finished drawing? For that, I think the best bet we have is that we double click on the model that we have and investigate what makes this chair what it is. I'm just going to look for the right numbers and inputs for this. So first of all, we have one backrest, we have a seat, and we have a few legs. I think the maybe the seat will be the easiest to do here. So let's start with that. So I go to the tool that I already know and love, the interior smart objects, smart object parts. And I start with a horizontal part. And for this, do I need to mess around with the projection profiles? Yes, for the fourth one or the third one, which is the top view. How do I get this shape into here? Well, for this we have a tool which is the star icon, and what I do is that instead of tracking this drawing, I'm just going to go with closed loop, click on it, and then I have the back seat or the seat like that. So that is done. I need to define the main sizes, and I know that this value, it's going to be 500. Base offset, the profile height is also 500. So you could be saying that, okay, then I don't understand what's going on. I just added a profile and then I'm changing the sizes. You could do that. So the software is parametric, so it tries its best to readjust the profile whenever you change the sizes, which is very handy. Thickness should be 100, and the rounding, I think this is one important thing here. You could be adding customized rounding to sides, so you don't have to round all the elements. You can just round the sides, and then you have another rounding value to the top. So you could be saying this is 20. So you could customize this. I'm just going to use it for all edges. It's going to be maybe 2 millimeters. Sorry, that's a bit 20. I think that 20 is much better. I missed that was a 0. And again, if you want to crank up the surface resolution, you can do that, and I advise you to do, because otherwise it's going to be very, I don't know, artificial. So we have that. Well, we need to have some kind of pillow effect on the top, so I'm clicking on the right tab, and the pillow effect is added like this, and I need to crank this up to something else. I think 50 millimeters will be good. Update. Much better. So material, I think cream number 1 is good. So maybe some kind of leatherish would be good, or use the textile linen number 2. Whichever is better. I think I'm going to use the linen one. I liked this before. So I'm going to go with the save button, saving it as, and the name would be, oh, I hope that's how Marseille is spelled. Marseille chair seat. The category is going to be my, and I'm naming it. And also, whenever I save something, I love to place it down like that. So you could be saying, oh, this is different because I need to crank up the height of the seat. I don't need to, because when I'm using the furniture assembly, then I could be doing that. So I don't need to do that now. Let's proceed with the legs. I think that would make sense to have these 2 legs. I'm not going to do the whole thing, just some parts so that you have an idea. So I start with drafting. No, sorry, interior. And again, I'm using the Loft tool, which is what you could be using, or you should be using when you are creating a furniture leg. So which profile I should be using? Neither. I'm going to use this. So I'm clicking on the star icon again. I'm going to record a custom profile. Click on select an item and select the profile that you have. Not good. Why? Because the top should be horizontal and the bottom should be horizontal as well. This I can customize. There should be horizontal ending on the top and horizontal ending at the bottom. So this is getting better, but the section profiles are still not good. And for that, I need to go from a profile which is 30 times 30 centimeters. Oh, sorry, millimeters. 30 times 30. And it goes into 10 times 10 millimeters. So I click on the plus icon, drag this all the way to the bottom. I'm sorry, like this. If it's not working that way, you could just say that I want to give it to 0, and then end of story. So let's make it 10 times 10. Accept it, and you have the leg. So again, you could be going to the resolution to make it a little bit more beautiful, but for now I think this will be fine. So I'm just going to go to textures. This wood panel would be good. So again, let's go to the, before I do that actually, if I go to the 2D representation, I see that this simplified would be good, but you could be going with a top view or maybe with a polyline or a customized symbol. You use whichever is better for your purposes. go to the saving tab and save this as Marcel chair leg, and the category would be my, and okay, and again okay, just to place it, so like that. So 2 out of 3, because the third part is actually the back seat. That was a reason why I left it to last, because that's the most complicated one. Let me just have a sip of tea. Are you guys mostly drinking tea or coffee when you're modeling? Let me know in the comments. So let's go with the backrest. What do we do here? For the backrest, we have one profile here, which is the front, and I know the curve. Based on that, I could be creating this without any difficulties. So let's go to interior. You might have guessed smart object parts. Define if I want to have a vertical piece or a horizontal one. I think this time it's going to be a vertical one. And before defining the sizes, let's go to the frontal profile and go to the star icon to pick up this profile with the closed loop option. And now I have one profile. This profile doesn't look this way, and that is because the sizes are different, but I'm going to amend that in a minute. Before I do that, I go with the blue option here, and instead of using a, or is it the green one? Let me just find it real quick. I need to pick up this value, so I'm just going to go with that, hit enter, and now I have a curved part, but it's also from the front it is curved as well. So once I have this basic shape, I go back to the geometry and change the backrest's sizes. I know that the profile width is 100 and comments are coming in. Only strong fresh coffee for me. Well, I don't drink that much coffee, to be honest. I mostly like coffee with milk whenever I have that, but that's very rare. How come I cannot change the profile height? Because I already defined it here. So if certain values are disabled, that is because you already defined the profile like that. Thickness value, how thick that should be. Again, this is guesswork. You could be adding the that based on the picture, or this is where modeling becomes interesting, because you could be always like comparing it with the images, see if it makes sense. So open up the images and see if this is how thick this should be. So again, there's no rules for that. Modeling is all about finding the right solutions in the least amount of time. Another comment, fresh Italian coffee here. That sounds very, very good. Let me have another sip of my tea and let's carry on from that. Okay, rounding should be the next thing I have to figure out, because this looks like a block of steel. That's not good. Let's round off all edges for like 30 millimeters. Okay, looks better. But there's one problem, and that is mainly that there should be one pillow effect here, but at the bottom it should look some way else. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to the tab where I can define the pillow effect on the front, then I can just click on the pillow effect and say that this should be 30 millimeters, hit the check mark, and then I have the right pillow effect. But there's one problem here, namely that the top part of the backrest is actually more pertinent than the bottom. So I need to have a larger extrusion here. But if I would add the pillow effect again, then I would only increase this size. So what do? You notice there's a green plus, and if I do that, I can have another effect on top of the pillow effect. So let's click on that one. And instead of saying that the full surface has to be made this kind of pillow shape or has to be extruded, I'm clicking on the reduced area, and I'm going to hit, custom area. Yeah, custom area is the one. And I'm clicking on this star icon up here. And now the software tells me, okay, that's what you wanted. Here's the profile that you created before, and define for me now how large is the area that you want to pillow out, if that's a word. So I'm clicking on closed loop, and I'm clicking in here in order to pick up this part only. And if I do that, now I see that there is a division line over there. So if I go to the second instance of the pillow effect, I can now crank this up to 50. And that is how you get this effect. So that is how you can sort of get this kind of effect that you have one thickness value here and another one there. So you need to divide it up for smaller segments. Okay, that's done, but there's one thing I haven't been able to replicate, and that is this kind of pegging. And for that I need to get another plus icon. Again, I'm going to go with a tuft effect. Let's just now hit the check mark to see how the result looks like. Well, it looks good right away. That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting it to look ugly, so that way I could show you how to make it better. But in any case, first of all, you could be deciding what kind of effects you want here. If you want to have some kind of button-like effect, or you want to have a pointed. So what it does, let's just use this kind of. Oh, that's the problem what I was looking for. So if you have a customized element, sometimes it happens that you have extra dots here, and that is because this is not in the middle if you look at it from the front. So I have some values here based on which I can add the offsets. This should be just a second. I need to look up the exact values for that. Actually, I went much more ahead in my work than the description. So okay, so you could be customizing the values, as you can see in the course guide, in order to find the right way, because sometimes you are not ending up with the right distribution of pegs right away. So you need to sort of like keep on fine-tuning until you find the right values. So see, now it's a little bit better, but now it's pushed to the side, so I need to push it to 230. There is definitely some guesswork involved in that one, but that way you can get the right result. So if you are not satisfied with what you have, maybe you could be saying it's still not in the middle. Use the right values, and then it could be good. So I think I'm going back to nailed. Padding radius, well, let's just crank it up to see how it looks like. Wow, much better. So this is actually what I was going for. Textures are not good, so again, let's go with linen. And I think we're done with this. You could be adding more effects to it, but that is the basic idea. Again, top view could be customized if that's what you're looking for. You could be adding effects to the back, but this time now it's time to save it. So it's going to be Marseille chair, backrest. The category should be my, and like this. So producer, I still don't know. So let's just hit OK, and again the backrest is ready. So here we go. Actually, I managed to put it at the wrong place. So let's just move it closer to the remaining parts. And now the story begins from the beginning. Oh, by the way, one tip I wanted to show you before, and I never actually got around to do it. So you know that if you want to zoom in and out, you could be using the mouse scroll, or if you are in a perspective view, you could be using this kind of viewer, so you could be dragging it wherever you want. If you are very, very far away and scrolling in might take long, then hit the shift key, right click, and drag the mouse, and that way you could be jumping back and forth much closer. This is especially important if you are working on large buildings, because then you could be just using this to quickly jump there, and that is the way it's easy to navigate. So if you want to put this together, you go back to smart objects, assembled objects, and then the whole story starts from the beginning. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to bore you with things I already showed you. But that is the idea how these things were all put together. So we imported the backrest, and then the seat, we elevated it, and then we added the legs, rotated them, but that is the idea. And again, if you are done with this, you could just save it to your library. Once you have saved it, you can still change the textures, and that way you could be creating something like this. So that is the idea. If you don't like any kind of effects in here, you could go back and change that. Now, that is what I wanted to discuss with the basics of furniture design. We created the footrest, and we created this nice curved furniture. The thing to remember here is that you always start with a picture, more often than not, and then you record the profiles, like this. Sometimes it happens that your drawing is getting dense, so you want to get rid of these profiles, but you want to save them to your library. So how do you do that? You go to drafting, and let's get familiar with groups and profiles. Now, if you want to create, What is the difference between them? The groups are actually a collection of two-dimensional lines. So far so good. Are these groups then? Well, these things could be groups, but then you couldn't use them for editing purposes. Well, if you want to use something for molding and shaping something, you have to use profiles. So we define a closed profile, and let's say this is what we want to define. Instead of clicking on the nodes, you already know what to do. You click on the closed loop, click inside, hit enter, and then you could name this. So this should be Marseille chair backrest profile, and I'm saving it into some kind of category. I'm not going to name this now. If you have a profile which is not closed, like a line, then you go with define open profile, and then you could just select an item and you save it as it is. So the bottom line here is that depending on if you have a closed profile or an open one, you have to use a different tool. And again, you have a tool for defining multiple profiles as well. So again, this is profile based work. You have to get the profiles right first with the drawing tools, and then you could use them to create something like this. Now I have a bunch of other examples for nice furniture pieces that were created using these tools. Let me just import them and explain what was going on. Again, every design job is a little bit different, but this gives you an idea of what is the potential in the tools that I'm showing you now. By the way, if there's any questions, just keep them coming. So let's look at this this bed. This shows us several secrets. One is that the mattress is actually, or the whole bed for that matter, was put together using the object maker. Legs were created, the base was created, and the mattress was created as well. The pillows were imported from the 3D SketchUp library, and so was the blanket as well. Now for the backrest, or the headboard, I think is the name, is again a combination of elements. One large board onto which smaller boards were added. So it's actually only two things had to be modeled here: the board itself, and then the sort of like a pillow-like insets on them. So again, with this tool, you could be creating intricate shapes, and they are going to be parametric. So if you are going to resize the panels, then they are going to be redistributed, which is a very, very neat tool. That was one example. Let me fire up another model where we have a bunch of other beds where I can explain about how these things are working. The general rule of thumb: always model things where it makes sense to model them, where it is easy to model them. For example, would I go ahead and model this blanket in ARCHLine? Why would I do that? There's a bunch of blankets on the 3D warehouse available. So what I usually do is that I download an object from the 3D warehouse. I rip off the blanket like this. So I just take the blanket and delete the rest. And then the remaining parts, the mattress, the base, and the legs, and the headboard could be modeled in ARCHLine. And then you slap the blanket back in, maybe resize it if you want, and then you have an object which is much more, it's realistic, but it's not time consuming to make it. So here are a few sort of like assembled pieces from which these things could be done. So again, ARCHLine is able to create upholstered furniture, but if you're looking for many wrinkles, you could do that as well, but it's a bit time consuming, and there are much widespread software products for that to make that. Surface modelers, for example. So you don't want to spend too much time with that, because these things are out there. So if you just go to the interior 3D warehouse and look for something like a blanket. Now one of these days I learned to type. So like this. So you don't want to spend too much time with creating that. Create the bed, and the rest can be just imported. And that gives you the end result like that one, which would look amazing on a renderer if you do the rendered images. And that is what I wanted to discuss today during the upholstered furniture masterclass, if I can say so. Let's look at the questions. There was one question about with the Smart Object tool. Can you round selected edges as opposed to all? Now you can, but there are two tools here to consider. One is the Smart Object, where you are creating something like this, Smart Object Parts, and you go to horizontal, and here you can define which edges you want to. You cannot just click on the edge and round it off. You can decide if you want to round off the sides, round off the front, or if you want to round off the back. So because now the back is still sort of like straight. That is one way to do it, but there is another tool in ARCHLine which is not done. It's not made for upholstered furniture pieces, but nevertheless you can use that, and that is called interestingly the cabinet door. Now what it does is that it looks the same thing, so it looks a little bit different. First, it looks a little bit similar. You first have to define if it's a horizontal or a vertical piece, and then you could be going on and mill off the edges. So you could be again do the same thing and say this is a 10mm rounding here and 20mm rounded there. So you could be asking why would you use this? Well, you would use this tool, the furniture front, because you can add insets in them. So if you want to create like a furniture piece which is rounded in certain places and it has insets like that, then you could be using the furniture front because you could be drilling holes. But if you're looking for the simulation of fabric and pegs and buttons, then you use the smart objects. I'm not going to save that, so use the smart objects. Question: is there a limit to the number of effects added to the surface? No, there's not, but if you are combining up things, then they could be emphasizing each other, so the end result after 3 or 4 effects might be a little bit overwhelming. And also don't forget that I already showed you how to keep track of the number of surfaces. Let's make a trial and import back in the chair what we just did, and I want to show you something. Once we did that, if you remember the course I made about project content handling, then here at the bottom you can track how many surfaces you have. Remember I told you that you are good to go under 500,000 surfaces. So even this one single chair is almost 10,000 surfaces. So you have to be careful about how many surfaces you have, because if you are cranking it up too much, then it's not really the object which would suffer, but the project itself. Again, if you are working on projects where these objects are in a focal point, or if you're a furniture manufacturer, then there's no excuse. You have to model this and you have to show them with the best possible light. But if you are just looking for thrown-in representation of objects, then you don't want to go into that much detail. So about the effects, the software is not going to make any kind of limit, but the geometry might fall apart if you have unrealistically large amount of effects to that. So I hope that answers the questions. And again, it looks like my audience is more like a coffee drinker bunch. Well, that's a shame. I'm actually drinking a very nice English coffee with English tea with milk, which is something that I picked up when I was in one of the exhibitions in London. That was a very nice sort of like initiation ceremony. One of our partners showed that to me. Okay, so that actually wraps up our interior design intermediate course session. So again, going back to the website, if you missed any of the shows before, and if some of the things I'm saying is not making too much sense, then you could be going back to the website and review the shows we had before. And that is actually the 8th and last part of this course series. And I am proud to say that we are going to have a masterclass series, again with 8 shows, which is going to focus on design phases, teamwork, framed wall structure, detailing, lighting plans, and I think even MEP parts. So if you're looking for the very best of what ARCHLine has to offer, the very top of the features, then that will be a show to tune in for. And the dates and the topics will be announced shortly, and probably we are going to start on the 25th of June. So be sure to check back to the website every now or then, because we have many new shows planned and coming up. Whenever there's a home office or quarantine or anything, whenever we are going back to the office, I'm keep on going to do these shows as long as it's being watched, and as long as I receive the amazing email feedback from you whenever I wrap up a session. I always get many thank you messages and suggestions for topics. So if you have anything you want to know more about, please keep the topics going. Until then, happy designing. Thank you for your attention. If you liked the show, then like the video and subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more shows coming up almost every day. Bye bye.